Hello everybody, welcome back to another election prediction video. This time we're looking at the best case scenario for Senate Republicans in the 2024 Senate map. So they have a very favorable Senate map for them, so they could get a good amount of seats here if everything goes right for Senate Republicans in all these races. So let me just set up the safe Republican states and the safe blue ones. Alright, I think we're good to go. So I think we'll start off with the first few states. Minnesota is definitely safe blue here. New Mexico and Virginia, in a best case scenario for Senate Republicans, these states can totally get down to likely blue margins, but that's probably the furthest they are going to go down. In Maryland, yeah, realistically, it's going to be party polarization that dooms Larry Hogan here. I just don't think he gets it below 5. Even in a best case scenario at this point, I think he's kind of done. Just looking at the polls, it really seems like there's no path to victory for him. Even a path for him to get it below 5, I just don't think it's going to happen. It's too. It's a D plus 30 state. It's just too democratic for a Republican to have a chance in. In New Jersey, I do think it's possible in a best case scenario this goes down to a likely blue margin for Republicans. I mean, taking a look at the polls, Andy Kim's he's not above 50 in some of these polls, but these were like Republican internals with like tons of undecideds here. But we didn't get a lot of polling out of this race, honestly. So, but in the best case scenario, just based off limited data we have, it can go likely blue. Maine could also go likely blue. I believe there's a Democrat running in this race, so it could split the Democratic vote here. But let's just take a look at the polling here. Angus King, however, he's leading by pretty significant margins. There was one poll only having him up by 10. One poll has him up by like 30. So it's pretty tough to see here. But the Democrats actually polling pretty decently, so it's possible it could go to likely blue, honestly, just because of that Democratic candidate who's pretty much running as a third party race in that state. But let's just keep on moving. So Nebraska, if polarization fully kicks in, Osborne will probably lose by an over 10% margin in a best case scenario for Republicans. In Texas and Florida, I don't see Scott or Cruz winning by over 10%. I just don't think that's really possible, especially in a best case scenario for Republicans. I just don't think it's going to happen. They're not the most well liked Senate Republicans. Like Rubio is very well liked, and that's why he was able to win by over 10 in Florida. Rick Scott's just generally unpopular, and so is Ted Cruz. He doesn't have the base favorability rating in the state of Texas. Montana, in a best case scenario, again, Sheehy is leading by 6 or 7. Or no, he's leading by about 6 in the polls, but that's kind of due to a lot of Republican pollsters polling that race, which makes the average a lot more Republican. But in a best case scenario, that would be assuming those polls are correct, then that can definitely happen. Definitely in the realm of possibilities. Nevada and Arizona, Democrats are up here by likely blue margins. So in a best case scenario, Republicans win a bit more undecideds. They can get these races down to lane blue. But these races are kind of just off the board for Senate Republicans. And they're already kind of writing it off in terms of funding. They're just kind of cutting off funds to these two states and focusing on the Rust Belt Senate seats right now. And I see why Carrie Lake's abysmal candidate. She's down by like 10 in some polls. Sam Brown, he's just not catching on. Senate Democrats are outspending him by like 3-1 in this state. So, again, the best he can hope for is a lean blue rating. I just don't think it's conceivable he wins. And now we're down to these 4 Senate seats. In Ohio, we could just argue polarization, honestly. In a best case scenario, maybe the ticket splitting is a lot less pronounced than the polls say it is. Another interesting thing is Sherrod Brown's not hitting 50%, so you could just add up all the undecideds to Bernie Moreno, and he narrowly beats Sherrod Brown, which I don't think all the undecideds go to him, but in a best case scenario, they would for Republicans here. Again, especially if Trump wins Ohio by like 10 or 11 points, Bernie Moreno's probably going to win just based off that large margin of victory. Again, for Sherrod Brown to win, it has to be an under 10% margin in Ohio presidentially, just by my own math of doing my own estimates of the state. So this is assuming Trump wins Ohio by like 11, then Bernie Moreno wins by about 1.5 in the state of Ohio, or probably let's just round it up to 2. He would win by about 2% if Trump wins it by 11. And now we're down to these 3 Senate seats, and I think they're all competitive for the GOP in a best case scenario. We could argue that, let's say, polls underestimate Trump again in the Rust Belt, and he wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all by lean Republican margins. We're already seeing the margin between Harris and Bob Casey get very similar. So if Trump wins Pennsylvania by a lean Republican margin, Dave McCormick can totally win here. Republicans are spending a lot of money on this race, and that closed the gap significantly here. So in a best case scenario for Senate Republicans, Bob Casey narrowly loses. In Wisconsin, we're kind of seeing the gap close between Harris and Tammy Baldwin. She's only ahead of Harris by like 1 to 2 points in this state. So if Trump wins Wisconsin by like 2 points, then Baldwin narrowly loses here again. She's not hitting 50% yet here, so it's conceivable that Hovde wins a lot of those undecideds there. So in a best case scenario for Senate Republicans, this seat also flips. In Michigan, this is the best chance for a Senate flip for Republicans because it's an open seat. There's no incumbency advantage here like there is in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Mike Rogers, arguably, I think he's one of the better candidates here. At least he has some elected experience as a former congressman in the state of Michigan. So he actually has some experience. He doesn't have any like negative scandals about him, so he's kind of a clean slate candidate. And some polls even have him leading here, but these Atlas Intel poll, it just has sampled a lot of Republicans. That's what I would say. But even Trafalgar has it as a tie, and let's say Trump wins Michigan by like 1%, then I think that's probably enough for Mike Rogers to win here. Well, in the best case scenario, Trump would win it by 1.5, so Rogers would win by about a similar margin. I think he just follows Trump's margin here. I don't think there'll be that much of a disconnect between the two because it's an open seat. There's no incumbency advantage, less chance of ticket splitting in that scenario. So let's take a look at the map, and it would be something like this. So in a best case scenario for Republicans to get 55 Senate seats, I don't think they're going to win Nevada and Arizona. The states are just out of reach, and I don't think Hung Kao is going to win in Virginia. I think that's out of reach as well. I don't think Hung Kao's the best candidate for Virginia. It's a very establishment state, and he just doesn't seem like the type of candidate to really have a shot there. But this would be the Senate map if it was the best case scenario for Senate Republicans. It's not my actual prediction. I did a similar map of this, but on the Democratic side of best case scenario for them a few days ago. You should totally check it out if you haven't already. But if you're new to this channel, I'd highly subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what do you think the Republicans' best case scenario is in the Senate for 2024 is. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.